I think I got a suggestion on how to set up my live streams. Yeah, maybe I should try to do it in this particular way. Anyway, let's talk about. We haven't actually had a conversation in a very long time. So, the media in general, from YouTube media to mainstream media, a lot of things like I've been watching them report a lot of crazy things. And that's one of the main reasons why I told myself I never want to do news, even though eventually that's something I want to do. Max, who you got? Um, I think Max Holloway. Max Holloway has good takedown defense. If the fight stays on the feet, Max Holloway is a little bit more technical and has better distance management. So I'd go with Max Holloway. So back to the basically the topic of this particular stream. Dricus Du Plessis' injury and Ilia Topuria apparently is going to fight for the vacant belt if Islam Makhachev does not necessarily agree to defend his belt, which I think is BS to be honest. But I just want us to have a conversation about first the Dricus Du Plessis. It's crazy how MMA media from YouTube up until like the mainstream take everything that's written on the internet and they run with it. The reason why I'm actually making this stream, and I never really comment on a lot of these news, because I have my way that I want to do things, and eventually I will have like I will start commenting on news and giving you my opinion, which is something I've seen my subscribers asking for. I used to do it a lot last year, but I stopped because I wanted to focus on building the like quality content, like breaking down fights. So one of the main reasons I don't like reporting on news is because it's hard to get credible information, right? Unless maybe you are affiliated with the UFC or specific fighters, it's exceedingly difficult to actually get proper quality information. And it's wild to see media members report on something they cannot confirm, right? So because when I don't even know how these news broke that Dricus Du Plessis was injured. In my head, I was asking myself like, how is this even credible? Who has confirmed this? Like, the UFC has not said anything. The only people who have been speaking about this are Charles Sonnen and I think Ariel Hawani. Ariel Hawani, I felt like dislikes a specific group of people, and I think that was his way of actually doing what he was doing in order to maybe try to build hype around the main event that he wants, right? I used to be a massive Ariel Hawani fan up until I saw some of the biases in what he does and what he says. Like, for example, some of the things that he said about Dricus Du Plessis, and eventually Dricus Du Plessis went on his show and confronted him. And like with who else? There's been a couple of people that have went on his show, and it hasn't been that great. And I don't know. I don't know if he's the one who started this rumor of Dricus Du Plessis injured, but it's crazy to see credible, in quotation marks, media members reporting on things that they're not even sure of or aware of. And this has been happening for a while, and it has derailed a lot of people's careers. So for example, what Ariel Hawani was doing, reporting on for example the situation with Ilia Topuria. I think and this is Ariel Hawani actually proposing. That's why I'm not particularly sure. Can you guys help me? Charles Sonnen is the most credible UFC source for YouTube. Teasy, stop playing, man. Stop playing. Well, FX, Tuporia is better than Dricus, I think. It's hard to say. Maybe, potentially, but I'm not going to go as far as say that he is better than Dricus Du Plessis, because Dricus Du Plessis might not be the most technical, but he has other things. So back to the point that I was making. So I'm not sure who started the rumor that Dricus Du Plessis actually was injured, but Ariel Hawani then went on to basically say after Ilia Topuria. Oh, so the rumor of injury, I'm not sure, but the rumor of Ilia Topuria headlining, the rumor of Topuria headlining against Islam or Charles Oliveira. I think it came from Ariel Hawani. Okay, you're tripping. Ian wins. Okay, weather report. Who you got? Carlos or Ian? I picked Ian to win. Carlos. Okay. Weather the storm. You're tripping. Ian is winning. Okay. Sabdi. Hello, brother. Now I'm on the a winning streak of 32 and 0 now, brother. Wow, if that's true, maybe we should do an interview, man. Send me an email. Maybe we can set up an interview. Sabdi is about to be 32 and 2 Anyway, so this story of Ilia fighting for the belt at International Fight Week, for me, I don't think it's true. Maybe it might be an interim belt. The story that Ariel Hawani is basically suggesting that Islam Makhachev is going to be stripped if he doesn't defend the belt. For me personally, I could be wrong, but it just feels like everyone is reporting what they want to happen, and this basically tries to create buzz in order to persuade the UFC to go in a specific direction, which I feel like is what a lot of people have been doing recently. I generally don't think Ilia Topuria is going to be fighting for the undisputed belt. I think the UFC basically told him, hey, he has an opportunity, because obviously we saw that Ilia Topuria is currently preparing for a fight. We saw that Charles Oliveira is currently preparing for a fight. I don't think the UFC would be stupid enough to actually strip the pound for pound number one. The belt would have no credibility. I mean, the pound for pound number one is still active in the sport. Why would you remove the belt from him if he is actually still ranked number one pound for pound? It would be really stupid for the UFC to do that. So I don't think the UFC is ever going to strip Islam Makhachev off his belt. Just like I knew that Dricus Du Plessis was not injured. It seemed crazy to me, but it looks like Dricus Du Plessis is playing mind games with Khamzat Chimaev, and it looks like the UFC is, I don't know, agreeing with whatever he's doing, but maybe not agreeing. I would assume maybe they don't trust Khamzat Chimaev to not announce the news, so they decided not to tell him about the upcoming fight. They just told him to maybe get into training camp, but but avoided actually telling him when the fight is happening, in order to avoid him announcing the news prior to the UFC actually having the opportunity to announce the fight between Dricus Du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. I assume that's what's going to headline. So this is my prediction, right? I could be wrong. So this is my prediction for International Fight Week. What I think is going to happen is Khamzat Chimaev versus for the middleweight championship main event. Co-main event is going to be Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira for the interim lightweight championship, and then the rest will follow. Purely from the main event and co-main event, I honestly don't care what follows after that. So that's my prediction. I think Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus Du Plessis will headline. Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira is going to be for the interim. Because obviously that's what Ilia Topuria wants. He says he's not going to fight for anything else apart from a belt. An interim championship, it's not the undisputed championship, but still a championship, you know? And it builds more hype for the fight. Whoever has the belt, I think it's going to be a lot more exciting if the fight is between an interim and an undisputed. And if Islam eventually decides to move up and fight the winner of the winner of the fight between Bilal and Jack Della Maddalena. It's going to make the fight even bigger, the double champ versus the interim of the lightweight. Because I don't think there's anyone who's going to beat Islam Makhachev at welterweight, to be honest. Maybe Bilal, but Bilal seems a little bit more scared. I understand his reasons for not wanting to fight Islam, but I feel like Bilal knows that he's going to lose against Islam. That's why Islam has never refused to fight Bilal. It's been Bilal saying, "Nah, man, we can't fight," right? And even Bilal have been in agreement that we're not gonna fight. But Islam has not necessarily, like, it doesn't seem like he doesn't want to fight. He seems like if Habib was not there, he was going to move up and fight Bilal. Actually, let me reply to you guys because I've been blabbering for too much. Sabdi, wait for me. I'm coming to the UFC, bro. We'll be waiting for you, my guy. Caesar Rich, I'm gonna report that Ankalaev got stripped of the belt. Maybe I should. Maybe I should because it seems like that's how the news works today. Obviously I would need to build a little bit more of an audience, but it seems like that's what you do. I think the media today reports on what they want to happen. They build hype around that and hope the UFC follow that, right? So that's what I think was happening with all these fake reports. I think everyone was just basically trying to influence the UFC to make specific moves because it's even crazy to think that people like Caio Borralho went along with this and didn't even know that this was a lie. Like, it's crazy how the UFC is able to keep information to themselves to the point whereby even their fighters are not even aware that this is a lie or not. That's one of the most craziest things I've ever seen because even Caio Borralho was surprised that, oh, why would you do that, man? I was so excited about, like, this was an actual fight that everyone was building up. I was like, why is everyone doing this when Dricus Du Plessis and his team has not necessarily confirmed any of this? So, but for me personally, I'm honestly happy that the fight is still on. I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to be the champion. But the nice thing about me is that I try to make sure that my predictions are separate from my fandom. It's clear I'm a Khamzat Chimaev fan. Even though Dricus Du Plessis is my countryman, I'm from South Africa. He's from South Africa. But for me personally, I just feel like Khamzat Chimaev is now on a different level. I picked him against Robert Whittaker, and I even said that Robert Whittaker, Khamzat Chimaev is going to finish Robert Whittaker. At the time when people were saying, Hamza is washed up, Hamza would have lost to Paulo Costa. Imagine, there were people who were saying Khamzat Chimaev is going to lose to Paulo Costa. I felt crazy. I was like, why isn't anyone seeing what I'm seeing? Like, Paulo Costa is not that good. There were people who were saying Khamzat Chimaev is washed up, is going to lose to Paulo Costa. And then he got a short notice replacement of Kamaru Usman. And then they were like, oh my God, he lost a close decision to Kamaru Usman. Khamzat Chimaev was like, no, I broke my hand when he slammed me in the first round. Oh my God, he's making excuses. He's going to get run through by Robert Whittaker. And I was like, okay, I don't think so. I think Khamzat Chimaev, if you go back and look at my predictions, my breakdown for that particular fight, I said Khamzat Chimaev is my confident pick, right? Because I knew that Robert Whittaker is not going to beat Khamzat Chimaev, especially because I saw a shift in how Khamzat Chimaev trained. Some of the other things that people were saying, oh my God, Khamzat Chimaev does not have good cardio, Khamzat Chimaev is going to gas out in the first round. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. Khamzat Chimaev was training differently. Even in the fight, you could see, go back and watch the fight. You could see that Khamzat Chimaev was fighting a little bit more patiently. He was using technique over muscle. Because in the beginning of his career, Khamzat Chimaev was mixing technique and brute force and muscle to actually get positions. Right, in the fight with Robert Whittaker, he wasn't using brute force. He was using technique. Everything he was doing was seamless, was smooth, and I attribute that. And even in my breakdown, I actually attributed that to the fact that Hamza Chimaev brought in Olympic champions to train with, as far as his grappling. And I love Hamza Chimaev's mindset because he basically took what he's good at and improved it, which is basically what Habib was doing. Like, why do you try? It's important to be well rounded just in case you face someone who forces you to stand, like Kamaru Usman. That's where it's important to actually find a way to actually fight on your feet. But when you are good at something like Habib Nurmagomedov was, why do you then say I want to be a kickboxer? Like, it doesn't really make any sense to me. So I'm glad, and kickboxers don't do that. It's normally wrestlers who try to be strikers, which is crazy to me. People like, what do you call her? Blanchfield. Erin Blanchfield came into the fight with Manon Fiorot and tried to be a striker. And I criticized her for that. I was like, she needs to fire her coaches, because why would you neglect the area that you're good at and try to learn something new and do something, fight with that person in what they're good at? It's basically the strategy that everyone was employing against Alex Pereira. That's why they were busy getting knocked out. Well, except Israel Adesanya got knocked out in the fifth round, and then basically ended up knocking him out in the second fight. But it was crazy to me to hear all these people say, I'm not going to implement wrestling. Why? Why would you do that to yourself? So to me, it's in that particular way. It feels like why would you neglect something that you're so good at instead of focusing on it and improving it? And that's what I think Erin Blanchfield should have done when she was fighting Manon Fiorot. And I think she would have had a little bit more success had she done that. And we saw that when she was fighting Rose Namajunas. She had a little bit more success when she was mixing it up, even though I don't feel like she was mixing it up enough. But she had a bit more success when she was, what do you call it, mixing up in the wrestling, which is something I also love about Khamzat Chimaev. Even though I can see that he's trying to improve his striking, you can clearly see that his primary focus is improving what he's already good at, which is wrestling, and which is what a lot of strikers do. Israel Adesanya did not come into the UFC and say, oh, I'm good at striking, maybe I should be a grappler. No. Learn how to defend takedowns, learn how to get up, and focus on building on what you're good at. That's what Hamza is doing. Alex Pereira did the same thing. It's only wrestlers who come into the UFC and I'm going to be a striker and prove myself to them. Why? Anyway, I think Khamzat Chimaev is a special fighter. I think he's going to get this one done. To all the South Africans, I apologize, my people. The same way I paid the Peyton Talbot to beat Cameron Simon, who is also my countryman. I'm honestly going to go with Khamzat Chimaev. I just think he's on a different level. Even though Dricus Du Plessis has muscles for days, and Dricus Du Plessis has a strong mind. It really worries me because he doesn't give up. That guy doesn't give up. So if Khamzat Chimaev, but I do believe that Khamzat Chimaev's cardio has improved, right? Criticism that he got in the past, for example, against Gilbert Burns, I think in that particular fight, the pace was crazy. Even the commentators, go back and watch that fight. The pace was insane, right? There was no defense being used in that particular fight. So you can have your criticisms or whatever the case is, but I feel like they were both tired mainly because of the pace. And obviously Gilbert Burns has been at the top for a very long time. He was fighting someone who was ranked, I think at that point, Khamzat Chimaev was ranked number 12 or something like that, or number 11. So number 11 was fighting number 2. The Gilbert Burns was ranked number 2 at the time. So people were criticizing Khamzat Chimaev for not having cardio purely because he was fighting number two at an insane pace, right? That was a young Hamza Chimaev who needed improvement. And I think he has grown ever since. I think his cardio has improved. I think he's focusing a lot more on wrestling, which is a dangerous thing, in my opinion, because he's already good. And now that he's training with Olympians, he's training with like as many talented people as he can find, it's only going to improve his wrestling abilities more. That's why people were shocked. I wasn't, but people were shocked when he did what he did to Robert Whittaker. Um, so I think Hamza Chimaev is definitely going to beat the Dricus Du Plessis. I don't think cardio is going to be an issue. I don't think skill is going to be an issue. I think Hamza Chimaev will be able to strike. And normally, what gives Dricus Du Plessis an advantage when his striking is not at the fight with Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya was picking apart Dricus Du Plessis like he was just destroying him, right? He was just destroying him, and Dricus Du Plessis ended up finding a way to get the fight to the ground. That's not going to happen with Hamza Chimaev. So, if there's any way Dricus Du Plessis is going to win this fight, it has to be on the feet. Hamza Chimaev has a chin. We saw that, and he had a chin against Gilbert Burns when he was cutting down to welterweight. And we all know that when you cut weight to a lower division, it takes away your ability to take a punch. And Hamza Chimaev still had a chin at welterweight. You go back and watch the fight with Gilbert Burns. Even though Burns had dropped him once, it showed that the guy has a chin. So at middleweight, it's not going to be so easy to drop him. So I don't think he's going to lose on the field. Hamza Chimaev is a really good striker. Um, and on the ground, he's an elite wrestler. He's an elite grappler. So unfortunately, I don't know if I see a path to victory. Even though Dricus Du Plessis looked improved in his previous fight against Sean Strickland, I don't honestly see a path to victory for him. But he's one of the most strong-minded people I've ever seen. So if anyone can do it, it's probably him. If he fails, second in line would be Caio Boralho, especially because he's trained with Hamza Chimaev. So that's the second thread. The final thread, in my opinion, is probably going to be Bo Nickal, only if Bo Nickal is as good as he says he is, right? Well, future, I don't think, but if he's as good as he says he is, but I think Hamza Chimaev would just knock him out on the feet. Even if Hamza Chimaev wouldn't have to grapple with him. If Bo Nickal is that good on the ground, then Hamza Chimaev would just defend takedowns and just knock him out on the feet. So yeah, Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. I think I've spoken about this particular fight. I think Ilia Topuria knows he's going to lose on the feet against Islam Makhachev. That's why Ilia Topuria has been saying he's going to wrestle. He's going to be the first person to submit Islam Makhachev. I think that is coming from the fact that he knows on the feet Islam Makhachev is one of the most talented strikers, and he's not going to win that particular fight. And if you want to dispute, and I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, of course, element of wrestling, that's why he was successful. But he was winning the striking exchanges against Alexander Volkanovski. Say what you want about the first fight, but Makhachev was landing more accurately and more significantly. The second fight, he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski through striking. He didn't even shoot once, right? He outstruck Dustin Poirier, one of the best strikers in the UFC. So if you want to argue about Islam Makhachev being one of the best strikers, I don't know what to show you to prove to you, because like he's been outstriking talented strikers. So Ilia Topuria, for me, and I've said this before, Ilia Topuria was getting touched up by Max Holloway. He was getting touched up by Alexander Volkanovski. Ask yourself this question, right? Why do you think Ilia Topuria got to a decision with Josh Emmett, but knocked out Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. Josh Emmett has never held a UFC belt, right? So ask yourself why Josh Emmett got to a decision with Ilia Topuria, but Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski couldn't do that. Haven't you asked yourself that question? So here's the answer, or rather, my theory of why that is. Alexander Volkanovski is one of the most intelligent fighters, I think. I didn't realize this. I thought Ilia Topuria won because he's good, and he is. But I think beyond skill, I think Ilia Topuria is probably one of the most talented, or rather one of the most intelligent fighters in the UFC. He has one of the highest fight IQs. I would say next to Islam Makhachev, I'd put Ilia Topuria. He has one of the most intelligent fight IQs in the UFC, and I'll explain why. So remember, I asked. Obviously, it was a couple of seconds ago. But let me reiterate, or rather, let me re-explain what I was saying. I asked everyone the question of why do you think Josh Emmett? Josh Emmett has never been a champion. He's not even in the discussion for GOAT status, right? But Josh Emmett was able to get to a decision. Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway, and Alexander Volkanovski were not able to. It's not a coincidence. Ilia Topuria went into the fight with Josh Emmett knowing Josh Emmett can knock him out. So he went into that fight with a cautious plan to actually pick him apart, right? He didn't go into that fight with the intention of brawling with him, which is what he was doing with Alexander Volkanovski as well as Max Holloway, mainly because he knows they don't have knockout power. Of course, everyone is going to say he just knocked out Justin Gaethje. He just knocked out the Korean Zombie. There are certain punches that anyone, like it doesn't matter who you are, if that lands on you, you're going to get knocked out. Max Holloway cannot knock you out with a jab. Like there are certain punches, like obviously a hook in close range is going to knock anyone out, and that's how he knocked out what do you call him, the Korean Zombie, and that's how he knocked out Justin Gaethje. They were standing in the middle, and he landed a hook, and it knocked him out. Similarly with the Korean Zombie, obviously Ilia Topuria knew he could avoid those situations. That's why he was a little bit more aggressive in the fight with Alexander Volkanovski as well as Max Holloway. Before Justin Gaethje and the Korean Zombie, when was the last knockout for what do you call him? Max Holloway. Max Holloway, much like Alexander Volkanovski, wins based on volume. He doesn't necessarily land massive punches that will knock you out like Ilia Topuria does. So Ilia Topuria was a little bit more careful when he was fighting Josh Emmett, mainly because he understood that there's a danger of him getting knocked out, and that's why he got to a decision. With Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, he didn't have that fear because he knew he could avoid the one thing that even Alexander Volkanovski, if you stand with Alexander Volkanovski and you allow him to land a clean shot, he's going to knock you out. Like those are professional fighters. But Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, throughout their career, it's clear to see they are not necessarily knockout artists. Maybe, what do you call it, Max Holloway will develop into that as he moves into the lightweight division. Maybe that's what was missing. Maybe a bit more power, a bit more muscle in order to be able to knock out people. But in the featherweight division, that didn't exist, right? So I think that's why Josh Emmett went to a decision with Ilia Topuria, but Ilia Topuria was able to knock out Alexander Volkanovski as well as Max Holloway because he knew there wasn't as much danger going into the pocket with Alexander Volkanovski as well as Max Holloway. That's another reason why I truly and honestly, sincerely believe that if what do you call it, Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria fight, Ilia Topuria is going to wrestle. And this is based off of the fact that he saw the success that Alexander Volkanovski had. He saw the success that Dustin Poirier had defensively against Islam Makhachev. So he feels, okay, I think I can defend Islam Makhachev's takedowns. But I also saw Alexander Volkanovski, who he feels he's not as good as him at grappling, take down Islam Makhachev, right? So that's what I think Ilia Topuria's plan is. His plan is to basically focus, have a wrestling heavy camp, and try to wrestle as much as possible with the intention to avoid striking with Islam Makhachev because he knows what's going to happen. So mark my words, when that fight happens, because I do believe that Ilia Topuria will probably beat Charles Oliveira. When that fight happens, I genuinely believe that Ilia Topuria is going to turn into a wrestler. I think he's going to try to take the fight to the ground more than he's going to stand with Islam Makhachev. And we are going to see probably one of the most amazing grappling matches we've ever seen, or someone is going to get submitted. That's how I think the fight is going to play out. Either we are going to see Ahmad Sarukian versus Islam 2. Well, that's another fight that I would like to see. But you remember the grappling exchanges between Ahmad Sarukian versus Islam Makhachev. I think that's how the fight between Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev is going to be. There's going to be reversals. There's going to be like so many grappling exchanges. So for me personally, I think Islam Makhachev has more ways to win. And even though it's going to be close, I think Islam Makhachev is going to beat Ilia Topuria. Anyway, let me respond to the last. Wow. I apologize, guys. My stream was acting up. Yeah, we'll talk. My stream was acting up, so I guess I'll see you guys when I do the watch alongs. Yeah, deuces. Thank you.